Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Rectified Podcast. Today's episode is a bit different as we don't have a founder guest, but we have a guest who helps direct to consumer e commerce founders to go into retail. Kevin Joseph, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Kevin, you worked with a lot of brands that I love and I know. I'm sure the listeners and the viewers also have heard about these brands. Tell me, if I'm a direct to consumer brand and I'm selling online, why would I go into retail?
Sure thing. Well, quick background on me. My entire career has been in retail. I started out at really big companies, then went to mid-sized companies, then smaller, and then startups. I started out at PepsiCo, was there for a
Uh-huh.
number of years, and then mid-sized companies like Kind Bar, smaller companies that I helped get to 100 million in acquisition, and then have since worked in startups. And I've worked in food, lots of bev and lots of supplements, and then even pet and household supplies and consumer electronics, etc. What typically happens, to answer your question, why would they go into retail? Um, a few reasons. The first one is probably for profitability in the long run. What
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of brands found once they get to some inflection point on D2C is that they're spending a lot of money on consumer acquisition. And to make that investment back, it takes anywhere from 1 year or 2 years. And at some point, it gets to a cost where consumer acquisition is so high that it's not worth that investment to grow more online, or there's so many diminishing returns in customer acquisition that you need
Mm-hmm.
to find new channels to sell your product. It's just based on that P&L.
Yeah.
So oftentimes retail is an exceptional channel where in the long run, whether that's after 18 months or sometimes after a few years, depending on the category and the P&L, you can certainly be more profitable, much more profitable in retail of because of the amount that you can ship at a time, because the amount of product that you can instantly get across the country with one PO. So that's one reason. Another reason is you can get in front of an entire different set of eyes and audiences at retail who are not
Yeah.
shopping online. I think that many D2C brands greatly underestimate the number of consumers who do not buy their products online, and the majority of America is by far still shopping in retail.
Yeah.
And I think that pleasantly, a lot of D2C brands are pleasantly surprised when they see their D2C sales actually go up when they launch in retail and now have exposure to such a large
Mm-hmm.
new addressable market. Oftentimes, that addressable market will discover the brand at retail and then subscribe to the brand online if there's a
Yeah.
subscription. So, those are like I think those are the two most important and biggest reasons is a whole new subset of an audience who you can get your brand in front of, and new channels for profitability.
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
Yeah. It's so true. Like a lot of times when we're buying things in a grocery store, we discover new brands and then it's like our behavior. We go and check them out online and we start following them probably on social media or something. And then maybe there's a better deal online on their website and we go and buy things from there. But given the products that you work with are food and supplements, and the prices are not very high to justify, the cost of Google ads or Instagram or whatever it is that they're doing. So just like you said, it's probably better for profitability. Another another thing that I see often is that sometimes when it's a startup and it's like they're still at the beginning and not a lot of people are finding them online, they go and they want to put their products on retail shelves. What do you say to these people? Like, you don't know enough who you are and what you're doing. You're still at the beginning, but you think, oh my God, I need more money. I have all this inventory, and I need to sell them. And then you start exploring stores or whatever, any type of grocery store or whatever. What do you tell these people?
Well, it depends on a lot of factors. I mean, you definitely need what I tell people is you definitely need a strategy, and you need to know your operation in a lot of reasons. So in a
Mm-hmm.
lot of ways. So yeah, D2C and e-commerce is a great way to start for not only because it's a little bit it's simple or easier to turn on, but it also is a great avenue for minimum order quantities when you need to sell product before expiration, and that there is no retail cycle that prohibits when you can start selling that product to that channel and when you can't.
Yeah.
There's no you are in full control.
Mm-hmm.
You really are. That's something that's beautiful about D2C, but where a lot of founders kind of get punched in the face when they go to retail. But D2C is very much you are in total control
Yeah.
of of your brand, of your spend, of the way your brand is perceived, of what you communicate, and the claims that you say about your brand.
Exactly.
Um, and a lot of it's a great channel to help you sell product, and you can be in complete control of selling that product, especially if you have a shelf life on your inventory
Mm-hmm.
and you need to sell before that shelf life runs out.
Yeah.
Retail, you don't you don't have to be and sorry, and it's a great way to prove out your concept and
Yeah.
learn and optimize before you go to retail, where you can
Mm-hmm.
now and retail you can launch with a better result. But I've worked with many brands, and I've had many brands of my own that I've just launched in retail for a variety of reasons. They just the
Mm-hmm.
economics don't work very well for D2C, and they
Yeah.
do work very well at retail. The channel where you launch and the retailers where you launch in, and the strategy of your first 6 to 16 months to 6 years matters greatly in retail. Like where you are going to launch and at what price point and what is your distribution method is so critical to understand the beginning so that you don't get yourself in trouble later down the road. I work with a lot of people who say, damn, I wish I hired you a year ago because now I have to go and fix a lot of mistakes that I made when I was guessing doing this,
Yeah.
doing retail the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Retail, see, consumer packaged goods sold at retail is
Yeah.
the longest industry that's been around in the world. It's
Mm-hmm.
longer than tech, longer than the automobile industry, longer
Yeah.
than, insurance, longer than electronic, longer than hospitality. Like selling soap and food has at stores is the essence of our trade, and
Yeah.
it has been optimized and iterated over and over again for hundreds and thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people often don't realize what they're getting into when they go
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
when they know how damn competitive and this industry actually is at retail.
Mm-hmm.
um, that they often are surprised when they enter it, and they make some guesses and realize that
Mm-hmm.
not everything is in their control. That retail
Yeah.
is a partnership business and a vendor business. So
Yeah.
um, that's an answer to your question.
Mm-hmm. So there are brands, as you were saying, that decide that they're going retail only, but most of them, because it's easier, with Shopify and all of these, easy to create websites, they just create a product and put it online and hoping that it's going to grow somewhere. What do you tell these brands who start in e-com and then they want to expand to retail? When should they consider this, like strategically, not because they're panicking and they just want to sell in different stores?
So it depends on your objective as a company. Many people one day want to build, many people want to build one of two things, either a profitable business that they can live on happily. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a profitable business. You get cash and make distributions every year. You're
Yeah.
healthy. Or they want to build a business that at one point gets acquired.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to build a business that at one point gets acquired one day,
Yeah.
retail is critical. Every acquirer, any acquirer will require the presence of retail and at least some proof of concept at retail before they even
Mm-hmm.
consider an acquisition. And there are three reasons for that I'm happy to explain at some
Yeah.
point. But 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 that will be required. So to answer your question, when does it make sense to start thinking about retail? In my mind, I mean, at least a year to 14 months before you want to be in retail, you should start putting the pieces together to launch optimally in retail because it
Mm-hmm.
takes that long.
Okay.
A retail run company is completely different than a D2C run company from the operations side to the cash flow that you get in to the sales cycles to the retail marketing elements and tactics you pull.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about a business at retail, for the most part, besides the formulation of the product,
Yeah.
it is very different. So you almost have to set up and structure a company or pivot things that you're doing with your current D2C operation to make them work in
Mm-hmm.
retail. So the most successful brands I work with, we start, at least at least a year in advance before their retail launch to get,
Mm-hmm.
so many things
Yeah.
set up the right way.
Yeah. How difficult is it to get into a store? Let's say I have a supplement brand and I want to sell it at Whole Foods, example, just to make it more real. Um, how difficult is it for me to get into Whole Foods? Do I need the relationships or can I just reach out and it works? Like how does it function?
A lot of it depends on the retailer and the demand for your product. So I
Mm-hmm.
work with brands I've worked with some very well known, very high awareness brands, and it's easy. It's
Yeah.
easier. The challenge is not getting in. The challenge is staying in and
Mm,
selling and velocity once you are into that retailer, like Whole Foods, for example.
yeah.
Some retailers are easier to get into than others. I've worked with some very high profile brands that Whole Foods is like, you don't have um, your you haven't done enough research or you haven't done enough clinical trials to show that your
Mm,
brand belongs on our shelf. Whole Foods is that's much more stringent on supplement brands
yeah.
based on the clinical trials and research,
Mm,
whereas other retailers are a little bit looser on that. Some of them, I know some other strict ones and some looser ones. Um, but if there's generally lots of demand already for your product, if you're a very well-known,
yeah.
high awareness, consumers are buying your product online already, then retailers were like, well, I want to be part of this. I want to stay on trend. Then it's
Hmm.
much easier
Yeah.
sell.
Yeah.
If you're totally new to the world and no one's heard of you before and you don't really have much proof of concept, you don't have many data points that show that this it's a lot harder
Yeah.
to sell. And there's,
Yeah.
so it really depends on the status of the brand and the demand for it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the retailer.
Yeah, of course. So walk me a little bit. I don't know. You can say I don't want to do it, but walk
Yeah.
us a little bit through your process. Like I have a supplement brand and I want to go retail. What do you do? Like if I come to you
Yeah,
and we're going to work together to take me into the Whole Foods of this world.
absolutely. So I've launched 3 supplement brands into Whole Foods in the last
Mm-hmm.
18 months. Um, so I'll walk you through a little bit of that process. Um, the first thing we look at is your I get very familiar with your product and the category it's in. I get very familiar with the competitive landscape,
Mm-hmm.
who you'd be competing with, who you'd be stealing share from if you go on shelf. From the product attributes to the consumer demographics to the price pack architecture and the pricing, what we're really looking at here. I then get really close to your business's P&L, because a D2C P&L is very different than a retail P&L,
Yeah.
especially at Whole Foods when you're shipping through a distributor. So we get very tactical on what your P&L will look like and how that might need to be adjusted, or what any surprises that
Mm-hmm.
take place in your current status of P&L. Then we look at the two things together and decide if you have the right offering, if your price pack architecture is optimal for going into Whole Foods.
Okay.
So that you not only are purchased off the shelf, but also that, so that you can potentially get merchandised in different parts of the grocery store, which require
Yeah.
different price pack architectures.
Mm-hmm.
That you're right in the right packaging, because certain packaging at Whole Foods has to be in push trays. Some of it has to be standing packaging. Some of it has
Yeah.
to be certain dimensions. So all of that, in D2C, you can be in any kind of package you want. In retail, it has to fit within the guidelines of the real estate that you belong in that
Mm-hmm.
category. So we look at that. So the big price pack architecture is something that we study a lot of, because there are a lot of big opportunities that can take place with certain optimal price pack architectures, including being merchandised in multiple parts of the store, along with being an affordable and low barrier to entry price point to consumers who haven't heard of you before.
Yeah.
We then put together, then it's a big question around, we talk about operations. So we talk about, if you really want to do this, do you have the right supply chain set up, logistics set up? Do you have warehousing and your case pack set up correctly? Do you have G10s that are correct? A lot of G10s are your barcodes.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, a lot of D2C brands have different types of
They don't
barcodes that
have.
don't work in retail. Is the operations of this thing going to be accurate? And of course, all of this is going to tie to the right assortment, if that needs to get adjusted, and then your retail P&L, because you want to make sure you're profitable. So many brands launch into retail and they realize 6 months that they lose money on every unit they sell.
Yeah.
Which is just a really good way to go out of business, unfortunately. So we go through all of that. So when all of that is in a good place, we'll put together your sales deck and your pitch, which kind of encompasses all of this. And if there's a right partner that we'll work with, sometimes we work with retail partners, sometimes we don't, depending on the retailer, to help get you into the right doors.
Yeah.
We'll talk through demand forecasting at retail and how you create demand plans and make sure that you can forecast the amount of inventory you need available when you do launch into retail. We will get all of your ducks in a row from an operations, from a product offering perspective, from a pricing perspective, all of the ducks in a row there from a research perspective. And then we go to the meeting. And then we pitch. I can get you in front of whoever that's the buyer at Whole Foods, and we will have a very effective and persuasive conversation with them about why you belong on the shelf and why you're going to make Whole Foods a better place when we are there. Usually that goes very well, and then it's execution mode and making sure that we ship product on time in full. We get set up with our distributors properly, and then we turn and we have real velocity when we do get on the shelf.
Did you ever have a brand, let's say that got into a store? We're saying Whole Foods, but it can be any store.
It can be anywhere,
really.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, anywhere. Did you ever get a brand that goes into a store, but then maybe demand is very high, or they couldn't fulfill, the amount that's requested?
Absolutely. Yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of brands when they go to Whole Foods and they see their product is sold out, they celebrate. They say, "Oh my God, we sold out all our products. It's a good thing." That's actually a very bad thing for your brand, because the retailer is angry when there's empty space on their very limited amount of real estate on their shelves and they're not selling any product. that means, maybe you do have inventory, but maybe that inventory was shipped to the wrong DC.
Yeah.
Maybe it was damaged. Maybe something in your EDI ordering system isn't connecting properly.
Yeah.
So I've definitely seen that before many times, and it's usually the first way that you get um, that a retailer will say, I need a new supplier. So being able to deliver on time and in full is probably the number one thing that retailers count on when they accept you into their doors. So you definitely want to make sure like operations, production, supply chain is in a really smart place when you launch into retail.
So it's not just going into a store, but also mainly staying on
Oh my
those
gosh,
shelves.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Of
Yeah.
course. I mean, you have about, depends on the retailer. Some retailers like Costco give you 13 weeks to prove yourself.
Okay.
Other retailers give you 12 to 18 months. And, it depends on the competitiveness of your category.
Yeah.
If there's a lot of people who could take your place and then you're more easily it's more competitive. You got to really keep and earn your spot. But if you're crushing it and you're continuing to build great, velocity, and you're continue to bring in new consumers into that category, you have an amazing partnership with that retailer, which you should. You can do amazing things at retail, amazing things, and have a very successful, very high volume
Yeah.
business at retail.
There's a very known Canadian brand. It's a food food item, and they just got into Costco like a few weeks ago, and they were all over social media like, please go and buy our products from Costco. I didn't know that it's 13 weeks. 13 weeks is not a long time
No,
to
not at
to say that
Costco
you're
in your first
selling.
launch.
Yeah.
Yeah, Costco has
Yeah.
a very small assortment, the smallest assortment of any major retailer. They only take a few products per category, whereas most
Okay.
retailers take dozens of products
Yeah.
and dozens of brands per category. So, um, you really have to turn and prove yourself if you're going to belong in that retailer.
Yeah.
I launched 4 different brands in the Costco last year. I definitely know how competitive it is.
Yeah. So how does it work? Like if I'm a brand, can I do this myself? If I'm like the expert in everything and I did my market research and I have, everything set up, everything you just talked about, like I'm the expert in it and I'm able to do it, but I don't know people at Costco or Whole Foods or Walmart or whatever it is. Does it work to just like reach out to them like cold calling kind of thing? Or do these relationships with these buyers also help in getting the
Mm.
products in stores?
Having a relationship with the buyer or with a retailer helps undoubtedly, but you definitely don't have to have one. Um, you can either cold call that buyer, or that buyer sometimes finds you.
Yeah.
Buyers want to be relevant. Buyers want the
Yeah.
best products on their shelves, and buyers will sometimes often reach out to brands who they want on their shelf.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different ways to do that. You could call brokers who could make introductions for you. You can cold call and reach out yourself, or you could go to a trade show and bump into buyers who are looking for new products for their shelves.
Yeah.
To do CPG retail by yourself or with a team of people who have never done CPG retail before is definitely a recipe for um, wasting a lot of money. It probably can be done, but you will spend much more money um, doing it without guidance and help, or you'll fail. But
Yeah.
there are brands who have succeeded in retail without any retail experience before, but they ended up spending millions of their investors' money doing it rather than hiring someone, or paying someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. But this is like starting any business, like somebody who's just
Business.
launching a brand. If they've done it before, they will launch the second brand very easily because they learned everything from their mistakes. But then if you're doing this for the first time, you just won't know. And it's always better to ask someone, an expert or a consultant who has done this before. So this is the same thing with what you're talking about.
As obvious as that sounds, you would be surprised because consumer packaged
Yeah.
goods are so visible. You
Yeah.
walk around, you see them all over. They're in your refrigerator, they're in your kitchen, they're in your bathroom. I think people don't realize that this industry has been around for hundreds of years, and as a result, is the most competitive industry in
Yeah,
the world.
for sure.
And for that reason is extremely hard. And I think the visibility of the industry makes everyday people think that it's easy, and
Mm-hmm.
usually it just ends up costing a lot more money than
Yeah.
it has to.
Mm-hmm. Also, like every single product has been created. Like, how innovative should you be for a store to ask for you? Because I absolutely need this new category. There's rarely any new categories in
Well,
these stores.
it's two things. It's it's product innovation, and then it's also consumer audience
Yeah.
innovation almost. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
see there are retailers who actively look for product innovation, and something that's made without seed oils, or something that
Mm.
is in a convenient package format
Yeah.
that doesn't quite like you've seen some success in that recently. But at the same time, maybe they want the new generation of consumers. Maybe they want
Mm-hmm.
a product whose brand resonates and whose culture resonates with a consumer demographic that they aren't that they're under indexing with, which I see often as well. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if you can combine the two, that's a grand slam.
Mm-hmm.
But both of those can be considered.
Yeah. Let's talk numbers. Like how much money do they need to expand their operations? Of course, you cannot give a number, but like, can people go and take from their own money and say, I'm going to take this money and expand into retail? Or maybe they'll need to seek some funding in whatever shape or form, VCs, investors, bank loans, whatever it is.
So I will give you an answer to that. I mean, the short answer is, like every answer I give you, is it depends, and a lot of what that depends on is speed and critical mass,
Mm-hmm.
and room for error. Frankly, um, if you are okay growing slowly with door after door, and bandwidth and time, frankly,
Yeah,
um,
obviously.
you can do it. You can bootstrap this.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It
Mm-hmm.
will take you longer, and you have less room for error because error costs money. But you can absolutely control your retail growth with the funds of your profitability, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to be running a cash flow positive
Yeah.
business. Um, but you can't grow fast. You can't launch into Target 1,800, 1,900 doors because you can't afford the inventory,
Yeah.
because you have to, unlike D2C where you get paid first,
Mm-hmm.
someone gives you the cash and then
Yeah.
you ship them the item.
Mm-hmm.
There's a 90-day difference, at
Yes.
least in retail, where you have to 6 weeks in advance, you have to write a PO to your manufacturer and spend that money. Then you get the product, then you ship it, you know, 3 to 4 weeks after that, and it goes through its supply chain, and then it gets on the shelf, and then after that, 30 days later or 60 days later,
Yeah.
sometimes longer, you get paid.
Yeah.
So it absolutely matters on which retailers you're going into, how much inventory you need to purchase,
Yeah.
and the time you have. I think money is almost always becomes critical at some point, at some stage of your
Mm-hmm.
growth, to be a successful brand. There are, if I could categorize 4 buckets of CPG success, of what brands need, if I could just categorize in 4 buckets, I'd put it in these ways. One, money, probably. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
and of course, and I don't mean just like the brand and the product, but there are many brands who are just investor backed. They have cash, or they're owned by a big CPG conglomerate that can back
Mm-hmm.
them with cash to go push this thing forward and launch it into retail, and they can afford the slotting fees and the funding of the cash and
Yeah.
the time and the so money's big. The second thing is having just a really big audience. So
Mm.
having what you see with a lot of celebrities,
Yeah.
who are backing brands, it's very, very common. Already have big audiences, and
Yeah.
they have that's a form of that's like it's like a form of demand almost, but they have
Mm-hmm.
a community that they can speak with, and they can leverage that community towards a product and use that to raise money or
Yeah.
show immediate demand and purchase of their product, whether it's online or at retail, and that works. And I've
Mm.
seen that work.
Yeah.
The third thing is just riding a new trend. You've seen this with keto. You saw this with
Yes.
kombucha. You saw this with bone broth. You saw this with bulletproof coffee. You just ride a very no seed oils is very hot.
No pseudo
Um,
is the
is a
trend
trend,
now.
and
Yeah.
plant based was a trend.
Mm.
They usually last for 5 to 7 years, and
Yeah.
if you can ride that trend and
Mm-hmm.
execute,
Yeah.
importantly, execute against that trend, you can get hockey stick growth and ride that wave
Yeah.
and grow your business, piggybacking on that. And the fourth thing is usually like margin attributed sales from a channel that isn't in current isn't in retail. For example, if you already are a multi-million dollar company on D2C, and you can
Mm-hmm.
use that cash to help fund
Yeah.
retail, or if you have a private label business, and you can use that
Yeah.
to try to fund,
To
or if you
give. Yeah.
or if you have a big business in Australia or the UK, and now you're ready to use that or Canada, or you want to
Yeah.
use that to fund your business in the US. All of those I've seen as ways that you
Mm-hmm.
can build your business,
Yeah.
using a channel over here that you build successfully, or geography, excuse me, and bring that to U.S. retail. So
Mm-hmm.
those four things are what I've seen most common
Yeah.
in brands who are coming to retail
Mm-hmm.
successfully.
Now that you're talking about these points, all those brands are coming to my mind. Like they're people I interviewed on this podcast, like a bone broth brand. They decided to stay like online only. They removed themselves from Whole Foods and all of that. And there's another, like when you said celebrity backed a couple of episodes ago, I had a brand, Canadian brand, and Andrew Uberman invested in their brand, and now they're in Erewhon, and they launched into the US. So all of the examples you give, it just bringing back all those
Great.
guests I talked to. Yeah.
That's great.
um New trends are working because all the last guests before your episode's gonna go live, all of them are hopping on trends, like cold plunging and
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
drinks, healthy drinks, and all of seed oils. I didn't get that one yet, but
Cold plunging is a great one.
yeah, cold
Yeah.
plunging is you can see it on you can see it on the podcast. But all of these people, I noticed that there's always someone who's guiding them. Like, yes, they started at the beginning by themselves, but then there's always a point where you're going to get that growth that either somebody from, like cold plunging, it was Dragons, then they got funding, and, somebody was with them all the time. Then you have Andrew Uberman and a VC fund and consultants like you, or, there's always someone who tells them what to do. And what do you tell those people who say, I don't need you, I can do this by myself? Like, what advice do you give
Wow. I
them?
mean, it happens all the time. I usually, you know, in this industry, there are a lot of people who call themselves consultants, and there are a lot of
Hmm.
there's a lot of deception, whether that's from influencers who
Yeah.
deceive the way that they're going to, or creatives, or distributors, or brokers, or
Mm-hmm.
consultants. I mean, I usually say I don't blame you because there are, this is the world we live in. We
Yeah.
live, people will deceive you, or maybe they're helpful, but maybe even though their intentions were good, they gave you the wrong advice and it ended
Yeah.
up hurting you. And so a lot of, especially D2C, people in D2C tend to have their guard up more, I've noticed, than people
Mm.
in retail. I think it's because they're used to being in full control of everything in their
Yeah.
brand.
Yeah.
Um, eh, Whereas in retail, you aren't. You just have to have great relationships
Mm-hmm.
with many different partners for success. It's a team. It's much more of a grander team effort.
Yeah.
Um, but I wish them the best, of course. I usually get a phone call, not usually, but oftentimes I'll get a phone call 8 months to a year later,
Yeah.
which has happened many times. But I would, there's no, I, there's no shortage of brands that get to work with. But I'll usually wish them their best, and I hope that things work out for me. That's all I can really
Mm-hmm.
say.
Yeah. I think they have to be ready to accept other people's advice or input in their business, in their brand. And it's very difficult when it's your baby, it's your
Yeah,
brand, you
of
created it
course, of
yourself. And
course.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
always resistance. Like I see that also with people I work with or people I talk to on the podcast.
If
This,
you always want your brand to be perfectly the way you want it to be, then
mm,
you should run a D2C business
yeah.
forever.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to succeed at retail, it will not work like that
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many touch points involved with retail, from getting to the shelf and staying on the shelf and showing up and succeeding on the shelf,
Yeah.
that you'll have to change. But if you want to own and be and everything about your brand and operation be exactly the way you want it to, then you can, and you will have a very
Yeah.
successful, or could have a successful, D2C business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And plus, these retail stores, they have the power to impose things on you, right? Like, how do they want specific packaging? Maybe, let's say if it's Costco, they want bigger sizes of everything or a different way to package your product. And you have to abide by these things and you cannot control it the way you want to in these
Well, they'll definitely
situations.
share their opinion. I mean, everybody wants to win. A retailer makes more money when you make more money.
Mm,
When the product succeeds on the retail shelf,
yeah.
the brand succeeds too. And the retailer usually will only give you that feedback because the buyer thinks that it will help your brand.
Mm-hmm.
And they're right some of the time, and they're wrong
Yeah.
some of the time. But the intentions are genuine. You don't always have to follow what they say, and it's usually a combination. Sometimes they're graphics related in terms of the design graphics
Yeah.
of the product. But as you allude to, a lot of the times it's sheer like price pack architecture related, or the functionality of the package, so that it fits or works the way that it needs to in the
Mm-hmm.
real estate section that retailer is envisioning you belong. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's not even about graphics; it's just about the function of the product,
Mm-hmm.
on their shelf.
Yeah. All this to say that they won't be able to control every single thing if they're gonna
No,
go into
exactly.
retail.
No, right, right, right.
All right. Kevin, one last advice to any brand who wishes to go into retail. What's the number one thing that you want to tell them?
Oh my goodness. I would say really think through, without hiring. If you're, I mean, you know, I would say hire someone who has, either hire or get guidance from someone who has experience in the first 5 million or 10 million or 50 million, um,
Mm-hmm.
building a business at retail, that has general management perspective. Um, Either, and so what I mean by that is, like, don't, if you hire someone who comes from very big company retail, they may not have. It's a very different way to operate from
Mm-hmm.
$0 at retail to $50 million at retail. Or if you hire someone who only has experience doing retail sales, that person may not understand how to build the P&L right for Whole Foods
Yeah.
versus Costco versus Walmart versus Target, et cetera. Or they may not understand the retail marketing aspect or the operations aspect of retail marketing. So having a general management
Mm-hmm.
person is helpful. And if you are going to hire someone, I think one of the biggest mistakes that successful D2C brands make is that they they hire someone who is a junior level person with modest experience in a very
Yeah.
narrow scope. And they do that because they don't think that they need someone who really understands all aspects of retail, or they don't want to give
Mm-hmm.
away equity. And so they
Yeah.
hire junior level talent because any very seasoned expert person is obviously going to want to be treated like a true partner. And you know, I see that often, and usually it's a time clock of about 9 to 12 months,
Mm.
and usually a spend of at least $1 million plus,
Yeah.
sometimes much more than that, before they realize they made a mistake and they should have
Mm-hmm.
hired this type of person and made them a true partner, and incentivized them to make it all work.
Yeah.
Um, that you know it's really great. You have this thing called equity or cash, and use that to your advantage to find someone who is an expert at retail.
Yeah.
Even more helpful in your category if it's
Mm-hmm.
supplements or if it's food bev,
Yeah.
um, and or two people. Um, and retail is a 360-degree general management business. It is not just a singular
Mm-hmm.
scope, and
Yeah.
you absolutely need seasoned experience to know it well. So that's what I would say.
Mm-hmm. All right. Perfect. Kevin, where can we find you? Well, do you have a website? Do you have
Sure,
Instagram? Do you have
yeah.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, I have a
Just
website. So my company is called Perpetual CPG. My company is called
okay.
Perpetual CPG. My website is perpetualcpg.com. My email
Yeah.
is kevin@perpetualcpg.com.
We're gonna
Easy
put
easy to get a
everything
hold
in.
of.
Yeah, we're gonna link to everything in the description. Um, just like sell yourself in 1 minute. Like if a brand is listening now to this podcast, how can they work with you?
Oh my gosh, so I mean, I work both me and my team of people work very, very deeply as partners with our brands. We take a very limited number of brands a year. We just don't have enough
Mhm.
people or enough time to take as many brands who come our way. But we are in-depth partners who truly like come in as part of your team and help you launch the right way. We care about every brand that we select to work with, and who select us in return, of course. And we treat every brand as if it's we're truly part of it. And
Mhm.
so we look at everything, and it's been a ton of fun. The brands who are with us the longest, usually have the most success.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Kevin. We're gonna link to your email, to your website, to your LinkedIn, everything in the description of the podcast. It was a pleasure talking to you and to all the listeners and the viewers on the podcast. We'll be back next week with a new episode.